Hi everyone, Tracy DW here. Well, my episodes over the past few months have consisted of my interview with fellow author and podcaster Makonnen Sankofa, and also showcasing my poetic narratives and podcast on the Black Books Show virtual tour. I hope that you all enjoyed those episodes and found them entertaining as well as informative and educational. Now, I'd like to begin this first episode of the new year by saying a huge thank you once again to all my co-listeners and co-learners for yet another successful year for Stories to be Told, the podcast series. If you've been with me from the very start back in October 2020, thank you so much for staying the course. Your likes, shares and comments have helped to promote this podcast, and to all my new listeners, I'd like to extend to you a warm welcome. Stories to be Told, the podcast series, is a little different to the other history podcasts. A companion to my poetic narratives, which are targeted at 9 to 14-year-olds, it was born out of my research notes that didn't make it into the stories, and it was originally going to be a closed project with a limited number of episodes. However, the focus for these episodes widened into other trending topics, suggestions from family and friends, as well as personal interests and topics that I discovered on my continual learning journey, which I'm sharing with you, and I hope you're enjoying the ride. If you're new to this podcast and would like to get a real sense of who I am and my why, then the biographical episodes such as the trailer, obviously, and other episodes such as Spread the Word, A Moment That Changed My Life, and Our Cover Story are the best places to begin. Also, it's essential to become familiar with what I call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement. My stories, or poetic narratives as I like to call them, and you can listen to the Stories So Far episodes, parts 1 to 6, where I share anecdotes and also read extracts from them. If you haven't done so already, why not visit storiestobetold.com and sign up for your free samples from my first 4 titles? You'll also receive my monthly newsletter as well as the chance to win one of my monthly promotional giveaways. Just visit the promotions page of the website for more details. The link is in the show notes. So, without further delay, let's kick off the new year with a look back at the past and share some final thoughts through a countdown of the top 5 episodes from last year which you made most popular. The selection this time around really marked key moments in politics, society, history and culture over the last 12 months. The episode coming in at number 5 was For God and the Empire. It's a Matter of Honour. It was inspired by the release of information relating to the UK's New Year's honours and the list of those who were prominent recipients for last year. There was discussion once again about the significance and relevance of the award, as well as its association with empire and colonialism. The dialogue continues to move forward in possibly renaming the award and makes the case that the New Year's list should not be a reward for doing your job, a basis for grace or favour, or for being a blood relative, but should honour ordinary people who make extraordinary achievements. This particular episode makes me think about the late poet, author and TV presenter Benjamin Zephaniah, whose sudden passing sent shockwaves across the literary community. Benjamin Zephaniah was one of the best-known recipients who refused to accept the award in protest of its association to empire and colonialism, and so this episode is dedicated to him. Here's an extract. In 2004, a Commons Committee report entitled A Matter of Honour, Reforming Our Honour System, recommended phasing out the title Order of the British Empire, as it was now considered unacceptable, being thought to embody values that are no longer shared by many of the UK's population. There has always been notable nominees of the orders who have declined their awards due to its association with British colonialism, and in recent weeks a number of celebrities have also returned their honours because of this association. But when did the orders of chivalry and the honours system become colonialised? The honours list was first published in 1890 in the London Gazette, and it included the Indian Order of Merit, a military or civilian decoration of British India first awarded in 1837 but cancelled in 1947. But it was Queen Victoria's successor, Edward VII, who established an Order of Merit for the Commonwealth realms on the 26th of June 1902 to acknowledge exceptionally meritorious service in our Navy, Army and towards the advancement of art, literature and science. Its 24 living members currently represent a range of ethnic backgrounds. Each individual has contributed a vast body of work, with contributions ranging from architecture, philanthropy and politics to broadcasting, playwriting and history. Baroness Floella Benjamin and Sir David Attenborough being two of its most prominent members. However, there has not been a replacement for its last honorary member, Nelson Mandela, since his death in 2013. At number 4 is the episode What's the State of the Union? An episode which was the first part of a two-part series inspired by events from the aftermath of the UK's departure from the European Union. Events which threatened the harmony of the UK's own union of its 4 members, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I raised an important point within the context of this aftermath, which highlighted the question as to whether the UK should or shouldn't pay reparations to its Commonwealth nations. Could the reason why dialogue on the issue remains closed and unanswered simply be that we continue to ask the wrong questions? With the new UK monarch granting permission to have his family's archives examined as beneficiaries from the transatlantic slave trade, is this an opportunity to encourage open dialogue about the issue? Although we know that the union of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is an intrinsic part of the British Empire, we sometimes forget for a moment that this union was also a product of colonialism. Those of us who were born and reside in the UK overlook this phenomenon of invasion and conquest and just see it as a part of the Union's heritage. This is probably because as British citizens we are the beneficiaries of a certain level of relative ease and comfort from the economic and political stability born from the gradual build-up of wealth over the course of centuries. Centuries of the UK's colonial activities across the globe. It is interesting that there is a perspective that the UK is not only intrinsic but is also a victim of colonial activity, and this is beginning to grow as a counter-argument in support of non-payment of reparations to its former colonies. The invasions of the Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings and Normans have without doubt left indelible marks upon British society. Each wave of invasion and settlement tells a fairly coherent narrative of the different lifestyles, achievements, hierarchies, and value systems of these cultures. Though these eras have left relics and influenced many aspects of our present lives, the consequences of many actions and decisions of key individuals are positioned too far back into the past to be held to account today, and much of their global influence may have been eradicated by colonial practices. Also, we should remember that the issue of reparations should focus upon the fact that after slavery was abolished in 1807 and then across its empire in 1833, the plantation owners received compensation, which their descendants have benefited from to this very day, whereas the enslaved received nothing, and many of their descendants continue to live out the consequences of the political and economic policies of their former colonial masters. The question isn't should reparations be paid, but what form could reparations be given in today's modern world to address the poverty, resource issues, and imbalance of economic power that still endures? Reparations can mean different things to different societies and can bring about a range of outcomes meeting each society's needs. For this reason, we should always remain on top of this subject area and never allow it to be trivialised or allow ignorance, complacency, and sarcasm to engage us in conversations which cause us to race to the bottom. The next episode was the most listened to on Spotify, but it comes in at number 3 on total downloads. An Ode to Africville has some wonderful parallels with my first published poetic narrative, Caribbean Wind, written in celebration of the Windrush generation, which my grandparents and parents are a part of. I discovered information about this Canadian settlement when researching for the podcast episode, The Book of Negroes, How Africa Came to Nova Scotia. It was then, back in autumn 2020, that I also came across the Canadian Nova Scotian Archives, which provides a wealth of primary sources about the experiences of the early settlements established by Africans post-American Revolution. On discovering that Canadian Heritage Month coincided with Black History Month in the US in February, I decided to use my research to create a podcast episode to commemorate the event. However, with the turn of events in February 2022, the podcast took on a new direction and format, and so the notes for the episode lay dormant for another year. By the end of January 2023, I found myself working to a tight deadline and so decided to try writing the episode as another poetic narrative. Could I pull this off? I thought to myself, as I hadn't written any stories for a while, so I didn't know if it was going to be any good. However, you loved the end result. I'm thinking seriously about publishing it as a poetic narrative, as I didn't originally write any stories about colonialism and Canada, but it will need a little polishing up before it is ready to go to print. But for now, here's an extract. With a few seeds and some tools, they set their shoulders to the plough. To work, to sow, to build and grow, as only they knew how. But the land was hard, infertile, and the jobs low paid and few. They scratched their heads. They were confused and didn't quite know what to do. They had suffered the heat of one type of hell and now the cold of another. then realised that this new kind of hell had just frozen over. Only a third had regular jobs, and though others got to travel, the work seemed to mirror the old kind of enslavement, but only, this time, without the shackles. This hell continued into the 20th century. A new wave had begun as the sewage, prisons and factories transformed Africville into a slum. Not a wave that would bring improvements, but would signal that it's time for Africville to be blown away to the ending of its life. In at number 2 is an episode whose title is a twist on a children's classic tale by Roald Dahl. In this episode, Ghana and the Chocolate Factory, I explored the potential for Africa to control its narrative, breaking free of its colonial past and future, by not only owning its raw resources but controlling production and output, as well as having the power to monopolise and negotiate global market prices, and in doing so, create huge profit margins. I applied a SWOT analysis to examine the country's state of play at the time of the podcast, and I'll probably do a follow-up episode and give an update in this current season on how Ghana has moved forward with its ambitions. You can listen to this episode in full to hear my application of the SWOT analysis, but for now, here's an extract. Today, in the 2020s, Ghana has now been presented with a second opportunity for independence. The country's president, Nana Akufo-Addo, announced Ghana's intention to not only continue to secure price regulation and a premium called the living income differential to benefit farmers, but also make the transition from simply mass producing the cocoa as a raw material to actually processing and manufacturing cocoa into more products, including chocolate. This is an obvious game changer, enabling an African nation to do what European markets have been doing for centuries. Not only mass produce raw materials cheaply, but also have the potential to monopolise processing these raw materials into finished goods, allowing for a huge profit margin when selling the finished goods to other markets across the world. With the US being the highest importers of cocoa powder, the UK having the highest retail chocolate consumption, the Netherlands having the highest cocoa bean import, and Switzerland processing much of the world's luxury chocolate. This would potentially place Ghana as one of the world's leading producers within the chocolate factory. Okay, so drum roll for the most popular episode of the last year. This episode was inspired by a trending topic at the start of last year over a certain duke's much anticipated biography. Just a few weeks after the book's release, it went on to become the most successful selling non-fiction book of all time. If there was any doubt that the British royal family had become irrelevant, then this book proves otherwise. When my Audible account notified me of an opportunity to pre-order a copy of Spare by the Duke of Sussex, I replied, "Yes, I would," and promptly clicked the pre-order button. I listened to the recording during my car journeys over the next couple of days, and it was compelling reading. Or should I say, compelling listening. This was an episode that served as a prime example to illustrate my strapline, which is the question: history is a matter of fact or perspective. Is there a definitive truth? Or is it about perspective and who controls the narrative? Even though the references to colonialism are indirect, I examine the wider connotations of royalty, race, gender, and class relating to the treatment by the press toward the Duke's spouse. So, without further delay, I present to you My co-learners and co-listeners, the episode that you decided was the most popular from last year. Here it is. Some spare notes on Prince Harry. As Harry retells the negative and disparaging narrative of race and class that has built up around his spouse, I ask myself the question, what is it all for? Catherine of Aragon, Anne of Denmark, Sophia Dorothy of Seal, Charlotte of Mecklenburg, Queen Victoria, Alexandra of Denmark, Mary of Teck, and the late Queen Mother Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. I wonder what all those queens of the past would have to say about the idea of the English rose. In the course of British history, there has never been a requirement for any Queen of England to be English. The origins of each of these women would have come from a range of ethnic traits and characteristics originating from a vast pool of ancestry, both recorded and unrecorded. There has been no requirement for a Queen or Duchess of the British throne to be either English or a rose. A woman's race, nationality or class has rarely been an essential prerequisite for continuing any royal bloodline. We have simply become entrenched and trapped within the confines of the social constructs that we have defined for ourselves. If you liked this podcast, then stay on this listening platform and check out my other countdown episodes related to this one. It's top of the pods and your season's best. Also, have a listen to the full recordings of all the top 5 episodes and get in touch and tell me, what was your favourite episode from last year? Was it from the top 5 or was it something else? I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget what I call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement, my stories or poetic narratives, Caribbean Wind, Caribbean Rush, Knights at the Round Table, the Berlin Conference 1884, and Gone with the Wind, Macmillan's Speech for Change. These are all available on the website in both Kindle and paperback formats and in ebook format at Apple Books and all other digital platforms. And also the publication of the latest 4 titles. Now, if you want to find out more, just visit storiestobetold.com and check out the learning platforms for The Journey's End, Giving Back Hong Kong, Bite from the Big Apple, A Story for New York, Hope for Zimbabwe, Arise the Phoenix, and also A Story for South Africa. You'll also find the latest newsletter and promotional giveaway for this month for one lucky person on my email list. Now, if you'd like to sign up to my email list, you can opt in and also receive your free samples of my first 4 titles. And finally, yes, I'm going to remind you, remember that you can also send me an audio message on the SpeakPipe link, which is also in the show notes, so don't be a stranger. Feel free to like, follow and share us on social media when you visit the website. Just click on to whichever social media link you would like to follow us on. And, as always, it's a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast series, and I encourage you to either begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. I'm Tracy DW, and this is a Stories to be Told podcast. Stay safe, stay well, stay blessed. Here's wishing you all the best for the start of 2024. Thanks so much for continuing to listen again and again and again. And I'll see you on the next page.